You're getting host village Nate too, which is
this is good.
I'm interested to see how I answer some of these questions in retrospect.
Okay. So first of all, just tell us where you grew up, man. Tell us where you grew up.
Yeah, so I grew up in DeSoto, Texas, which is maybe about 15 minutes south of downtown Dallas. Just to give like context to like the area, it was like in the middle of the Dougie movement. DeSoto was like a very middle class, like Black neighborhood.
So tell us about the tech background that you have.
Tech, I don't think I've ever formally been like a tech person, but my freshman year, as you may know, a good buddy of mine, Hakeem Mumford, and I started this business called Azul Bison. First beginning of like some type of tech feel. We had a little platform that you could log on and put in your room number or whatever if you want to get some tacos delivered to your crib. As a developer, that everyone used to joke and call it Mr. Pokemon. But that was kind of the beginning of like the backbone of everything was technology.
So what is MicroVillage Fund and where did that idea come from?
Village is my baby, of course, but like, the whole concept behind Village is like trying to prove that low-income neighborhoods across the country can self-direct their own development. What we kind of saw in Atlanta was that unless you had like a big kind of major infrastructure project like the Beltline or the new Falcon Stadium or whatever, there was kind of no reason for people to pay attention to lower income neighborhoods, regardless whether they thought there was an opportunity there or not.
A lot of people have money, they try to put it in the hands of people who can use it wisely, but what's sort of your technical solution?
10 to 12 week training program. We saw that there were entrepreneurs that had ideas and people that had already started businesses, but we assumed that didn't have access to the best kind of professional business education that kind of helps us certify, if you will, that these businesses are interesting or they have an opportunity that you can invest in. And then second is a debt and equity-based crowdfunding platform. The only difference is those certified businesses that have come through the program get profiles on there, and then you can put your money to invest in anything, a new honeybee stand or a new oven or whatever. And then what we do in the middle is basically kind of structure an investment, a loan that's between 7 and 15K, which is oftentimes probably way below market. The average interest on our stuff is anywhere between 4 and 6%. 6% obviously being the highest on stuff. We've struggled with what risk means and like how do you quantify that in a percent. But when you're kind of like the originator on the other side of it, it's more difficult to think about. A percentage point is only $10, $15 or so.
Right.
Okay, what does 10% signal to people that 4% doesn't, even though something very immaterial to your return at the end of the day?
Capital for liquidity strapped businesses. And I'm guessing that these are businesses who are in some instances already operating. They're not necessarily like startup loans, or sometimes they are, or how does that work?
Yeah, maybe like 10% of the people are startup loans. So most people are already having a business and, face, just growth challenges that any business would face. A bank, even though they might get a 6 or 7% return with us, they've got to move $1 trillion. So there's no, it's just volume. And
you mentioned that you're kind of shifting to a new project. You're heading into like a news chapter. You're more in the VC scene now, whereas you were helping companies and businesses, but now it seems like you're invert that percentage to where it's maybe not 10% of startups, but 90%.
The summer before I came to business school, I spent 3.5 months with Capeport Capital in Oakland, which is an early stage venture fund, focuses on seed and Series A across a number of areas. And then when I was in Austin here, I worked with a fund called ATX Venture Partners for about a year with same stage, seed and Series A, with the core thesis that people from California and New York are going to be moving to Austin in particular because it's a cheaper place to build. You still kind of get equivalent levels of tech.
At our event,
right.
We have founders, we have angels, aspiring angels, VCs, creatives, artists, etc. What role do you see yourself playing in the tech ecosystem?
I don't think it's particularly, it could be investing, but I don't think it's solely investing. I think over the last maybe, 2 years or so, I think I've realized that I enjoy investing, but I think the role is like it's a little hands off for me, right? Like I think most people at one of these like crossroads are either like people who want to do investing or like operating stuff. And I think I enjoy operating stuff a lot more. A lot of it is just supporting entrepreneurs that I'm meeting currently in the tech ecosystem. Like I think what's cool about my path so far is like building something in Atlanta and then seeing Atlanta start to become more of like a tech powerhouse, if you will, and then being able to connect the dots from Oakland and Austin and New York with different investors that are all kind of looking to create these little mini ecosystems and invest in these ecosystems across the country. And I think a great example of that was like Harlem Capital and what they did, right? I think they're a testament that large money managers are starting to realize that pattern matching that, most traditional VCs are kind of practicing now is leaving a lot of people out, and those markets are becoming saturated. Saturated markets aren't necessarily the best for outsized venture scale returns, if you will. I mean, I'm trying to explore my creative side a lot more, but also, I am enjoying a little bit of the last few months of business school where it's kind of like, you can just kind of sit in the middle of all the things and just kind of soak it all in.
I do want to just briefly touch on kind of your business school experience. Let people know sort of where you are, what you've been up to, and how that plays into your larger focus.
I think I left Village to go to school because I didn't really understand enough about the next stage of our work. We wanted to raise more money. There were a lot of entrepreneurs that we were working with in our first cohort that were opening up another location, or one lady opened up a shared kitchen space and raised a ton of money to do it. And we were like, dang, well, when we kind of started thinking about Village, we were thinking like we would be able to find those gyms inside of neighborhoods and follow them as they grow. But we didn't have enough cash for that. That was one of the big reasons why I went to business school. And I think in school, it's definitely made me far more potent about these things. Like, on one end, you get to just kind of just read cases all day and discuss them with like really smart people. So you get a great perspective on all these different problems and protagonists and ways to attack problems and, all these different things. I mean, I think a lot of like the core thesis behind Village and behind like impact investing is still there for me, but it's gotten a little hairier though.
You brought up what I think is one of the most important questions of our day is the question of geography and location. So Can you just talk a little bit about why you're making bets on Atlanta and Dallas and Austin and Houston compared to some of the larger markets, or how they work together? How does the Bay and New York and Los Angeles work with some of the smaller startup ecosystems?
I mean, I don't think trying to put San Francisco methodology in different cities works, right? I think one city that did, I don't know, like Atlanta is trying to do use that same strategy, but I don't think it makes as much sense because there's something about the history of the city that is history or geography, just like migration patterns and what people think are sexy, where I don't think you have that same level of like bite in SF as you do in Atlanta. Obviously from Dallas, Texas has always been a very special place in my heart. As far as, the tech ecosystem, it's not very mature, when you're in, New York, you're in Boston, you're in San Francisco, the diversity of ideas isn't as large. Facebook or Snapchat in Austin or in any other city that can afford to put billions of dollars down, customer acquisition, focus on like regional specialties, right? You've got a ton of like Fortune 500 companies that work there, right? That all have needs, all types of technologies that they need to kind of put into their supply chains and through the design of their entire companies. And I think that's a strong opportunity for companies to build there around those types of businesses. Like, for example, in Austin, people always criticize Austin because there's a hidden to first base, basically, right? So people will get to a valuation of $20, $30 million and they'll try to sell it and not try to go raise, a Series B. NY, I mean, it's interesting, man. I don't know, like I haven't spent as much time like on the scene. In NY, you got capital, right? In Austin, we might have 12 to 15 funds, all around $100 to $150 million. In New York, you probably have maybe 10 times that, right? And then at different stages, right? So we have 6 or 7 C stage funds, a few more in A, and then it really peters out. Maybe one for later stage stuff, and then you get to like leverage buyout. In New York, you just have like the diversity of your kind of capital ladder is far larger, far more diverse. When you run a $100 million fund, you might be cutting $5 million checks. When you run a $1 billion fund, you got to run, 10 times that, right? Which helps you invest in different types of companies that are looking for different types of things. For example, like when Casper moved to New York, right? I mean, I think that was a great testament that you can build a direct-to-consumer brand in a city like New York because you've got investors who got cash and can believe and finance your way to that type of growth. New York's fine. I mean, like you've got everything you need there. You don't have to leave for anything, which is great.
Okay, so speaking of which, tell us this, if you had to and you didn't have any other choice and you had to be in New York, that's where you needed to be, how would you get connected to the local startup ecosystem? Talk about what you would expect in a community there a little bit. Maybe also talk about if you were a startup in that city, how you could get to the the point where you were reaching later stages of
Yeah, I mean, if I were going straight to New York, I mean, you're just investing in the spaces that are there, you know? So the meetups, the pop-ups, I think it's far more interesting to go to spaces like what y'all have curated so far. I think the ideas are a little bit more organic. People speak freely about what their issues are. It's just, I mean, I think there's like a organicness, if you will, that you don't see when you try to go to traditional events, maybe sponsor a few of those things.
Yeah, if you're a founder just starting off, or let's say that you haven't yet broken the seal on that $100,000 revenue mark, how would you as an operator like counsel, help, or take a company from that point?
It depends on, you know, the type of business it is. But, you know, what I always try to think about is like, who cares about, you know, this thing that we're building, and start there. You know, if there are multiple different kind of counterparties that benefit from a product that you're building, I think that's what makes it really interesting. And then, you know, you have all these kind of potential different stakeholders that you can figure out how to get involved or bought into your platform or your product or whatever. I mean, there are a lot of different things to think about in that problem there, right? What market are you in? You know, who cares about what you're doing? Where's competition? And like, how are y'all positioned relative to them? From there, you can really drill down on like very specific things that you need, either ask around capital or around relationships, connections, investing in branding, whatever it may be, right? I think you kind of pick whichever spot of those things is the weakest, and you kind of put the gas on it and see if anything breaks. And if it does, then that's good.
You mentioned that you're interested in moving into more of an operator's role. Do you want to run a $1 billion company? Why or why not?
I think it'd be fun, but it would depend on what the space is. I would not want to build a $1 billion company in the impact space. Building a $1 billion business and doing it in like a capitalist framework, you know, dipping that in impact, are two very different things. Things I would want to build, I mean, like I would love to run like a direct-to-consumer brand. That would be a lot of fun. But what I'm most interested in is just like, how do people build better relations amongst each other? Facebook, LinkedIn, Snapchat, whatever, all the different social media platforms have kind of like broken off pieces of our personality that exist only in those spaces. And I don't think people really have a place to like communicate with each other in any type of way. So anything that kind of gets to that goal, I'm down to. I mean, I've joked around with people talking about like that maybe being a cafeteria space in like neighborhoods, or like even with the quarantine con thing, right? Like, how do people build more connections virtually? I'm down with all of those types of things. Let's see, I would also like to run like a really cool grocery store.
Are you invested in any startups right now?
3 that are all kind of village businesses and people that I met through Village. So first is a business, which is actually our first loan for Village, which is a company started off as Westview Pizza Cafe, is now Marty Shared Kitchen Space. So they're basically a shared kitchen space in Atlanta. They're like all of these cottage industry chefs that are in low-ish income neighborhoods. Lady who makes the kale salad, lady who has the, you know, fire, whatever that she sells, whatever. A lot of times those people don't have like serve safe licenses or like places to cook their food in a facility that's up to code. So she does that. She's crushing it, doing a great job. There's a honeybee company that we invested in, is attempting to supply more honey to the Atlanta Falcons Stadium. A very spirited entrepreneur. There's a company called Ground Floor, which didn't go through Village, but does very similar stuff. They do debt-based real estate, like renovation loans. There's always that like mezzanine capital, all the stuff that you don't have that you're trying to raise from hard money people. They essentially take out the hard money stuff with crowdfunding. That's really cool.
Yeah, I've appreciated our time. I kind of want to keep going as we keep like this conversation,
man,
because who knows where your head is going to be after you like graduate and get moving and going. But like you said, when you're ever in New York, you know, you have family up here. We'll definitely take care of you. Man.
Yeah, man. Well, we'll have to keep this up for, we'll have to do another one of these, man.
Absolutely, man.
I got questions to ask you. Well, look, I got questions to ask you, bro.
Okay. Let's do it, man. Let's get it.
Hey, bet.
All
All right, cool.